So grab the paperback Bibles at the end of the rows, pass them to one another. Welcome to those of you at mochurch.tv. We'd love if you are in the greater Cleveland area to come join us, come hang out with us here physically. Turn to the book of James, page 977 in the House Bibles, or if you got a Bible app, you can bust open. We'll be looking at the New International Version today for this message. So, The Invisible Man is a science fiction novel or novella that was written by H.G. Wells. Some consider him to be kind of the father of science fiction. And the story was originally serialized in 1897. And that same year it was published in its entirety as a novel. And the novel begins in a small English town called Epping Village. And it's on this wintry day, and it's in early February. A stranger arrives in a local inn in the village, and it's during a snowstorm, and there's this biting wind outside, and this mysterious man doesn't even give his name. I mean, it's late in the book before you find out his name. And he's wearing a long sleeved, thick coat and gloves and wide-brimmed hat and spectacles, and his face is completely covered in bandages except for a fake pink nose. And he's not a pleasant dude. He's not a nice guy. He comes in and immediately demands a room and a fire because it's cold outside. And he's irritable and he's rude and he has a foul mouth, and he insists on being left alone in his room once the room is given to him. He's like, I want to work. The slightest interruption bothers me greatly. Please don't knock. He just on and on, like, dang, this guy is particular. And so he insists on not being disturbed. And the visitor calls himself, by profession, he's an experimental investigator, and he spends most of his time in his room working on what seems to be like a chemistry experiment. He has a bunch of bottles delivered to the inn, and it's all these test tubes and bottles filled with colorful powders and liquids, and they're everywhere in his room, on windowsills and on shelves. They're just all over the place, and he locks himself up in there to work in his room in the dark, and he doesn't go to church on Sunday, the village people notice. And so they realize, like, this guy doesn't even go to church. And so they're like, man, this guy's strange. And he only goes out at night. Like, you never can really see him fully. He's in the darkness of his room or out under the cover of night. And his presence really gets the curiosity and the speculations and the suspicion going for the people who live in that village in this small town. They begin to gossip and theorize about who the stranger might be, where he's come from. What race is he? Is he a communist? Is he a patient? Is that why he has all those bandages on his face? Is he a criminal trying to conceal his identity? Maybe he's an anarchist who's in there coming up with explosives that he's going to use somewhere. The kids think he's the boogeyman, or for the Brits, the bogeyman. They think he's the bogeyman. And so the book says, well, whatever they thought of him, people in Epping, on the whole, agreed in disliking him. His irritability was an amazing thing to these quiet villagers. Now, later in the book, the stranger reveals his true identity. His name is Griffin. So we might call him Dr. Griffin. And Dr. Griffin, he was a former medical student who left medicine to study optics, which is the branch of physical science which studies light and vision. And Griffin explains how he invented a potion that could make living tissue invisible. He first experiments with it on the neighbor's cat, which I think is hysterical. So he uses it on the neighbor's cat. Apparently you don't, but I think it's really funny. He does it on the neighbor's cat, which I think actually is bad news. Like, if you hate cats in the first place, don't let them be invisible all up in your crap, okay? So, you at least want to see the little demons running around in your yard. And so he experiments on his neighbor's cat. Then he successfully experiments on himself. And to cover his tracks, this place that he's renting, this home that he lives in, he actually burns it down, and then he learns really quickly how hard it is to survive out in the elements as an invisible person. Mainly because if he wants to be invisible, he has to take all of his clothes off, and he's running around in the buff, and it's cold outside at times, And so he's like, man, to go buy food or to have a place to stay, all of it creates complication because now I'm invisible. how do I do all this? And he's just trying to figure all that out. Well, he steals food, he steals clothes, eventually shows up at this inn in Ipping Village where he begins to work on the antidote in his room to try to reverse the invisibility. And the strange thing about Dr. Griffin is this. He's mean, he's callous, his character is cruel, and as an invisible man, when he struggles to survive out in the world and his basic needs like eating and finding shelter, this fills him with more bitterness and rage. And it's funny that we find as the story continues that Griffin's really an enthusiast of random and irresponsible acts of violence. Like, he likes hurting people. And Griffin shows this psychopathic lack of empathy. He doesn't feel bad at all when he does something. No shame when he desires to cause harm to people. Sometimes he does it just for the heck of it. And he likes to hurt people. Unlike most scientists, Griffin doesn't seek like approval or admiration from the scientific community, doesn't want his findings put in a medical journal or anything like that. No journals, scientific journals, nothing like that. He doesn't want that. He just wants absolute power. As things continue on, he just desires power, and he wants to be able to do terrible things to people without any consequences. Toward the end of the story, after he fails to reverse his invisibility, he decides to start a reign of terror. And he actually says, you know, I'm gonna use my invisibility to terrorize the nation. And then he actually writes a note to one of the characters in the story named Kemp, and he tells Kemp, you're going to be the first person that I murder in my reign of terror. I mean, the guy is just losing his mind and getting more and more angry and violent as the story goes on. And that's where I think it's kind of interesting, is that from a science fiction story by H.G. Wells, really more than as a science fiction character, Griffin has gone down in history as a fictional horror character. Like, he's associated with the horror genre more than really anything else. It's science fiction, but yes, it's horror. As a fun example, how many of you, by round of applause, have seen Hotel Transylvania? Anyone seen that? Very nice. Jeremy Kunka has especially seen Hotel Transylvania. Well, yeah, if you've seen the movie, basically it's animated. Count Dracula, he has like a circle of friends, and they include Frank, which is Frankenstein's creature, and his wife, and a family of werewolves, and a mummy, and a zombie plumber. But also in that group of monsters is Griffin, the Invisible Man. I mean, that's really how he's gone down in history, is remembered as a monster. He's the Invisible Man. Why? Because of that combination of invisibility and the way he chooses to use it. I mean, if you could be invisible, there's so many things, good or bad, you might get into. But for most people, it's probably not going around and throwing furniture at people. Like, man, it'd be so fun if I could just pick up a coffee table and throw it at someone and they'd have no idea where it came from when they're recovering from their concussion, you know? That's the way that he goes with it. So, invisibility. Like, it's really a cool thing. If you think about superhero powers you'd want or things like that, like, invisibility is a cool thing, but it's also, you have to admit quickly, kind of a creepy, scary thing, isn't it? Like, that's why this goes into the horror direction, is it's scary to not be able to see if you're being watched. It's scary to not know if you're being followed. It's scary to not know if someone's messing with you or if they're about to attack you. Or if your motion detectors go off in the backyard and floodlights turn on and you're looking out there and you don't see anything, but the lights have turned on. That's creepy. That's scary. That's weird. And so it's scary to be unaware of someone who is around you. That's really creepy. And the Invisible Man I'm going to talk about today is a little different than the one in the story, but it's still the same principle. It's scary to be unaware of someone around you. Look in the Bibles at James chapter 2, page 978. And in the house Bibles, that's page 978. On your app, go to James chapter 2. Back in the first century, this is a little bit of a background you need. Back in the first century when this was written, we didn't have church buildings yet. That didn't come along till the 300s. And so people, when they met for church, met out in some public place, or most likely they met in homes. Usually, typically, churches were house churches. They met in people's homes. If you were blessed to have kind of a big enough living room or an upper room to have a bunch of people over, you would probably be the place of worship if you offered up your house. So when you read this passage with me, what I want you to picture is, sure, it's appropriate to picture Momentum's auditorium, but I also want you to picture a Mo group. The small group communities that meet throughout the week at Momentum, because the context here is really more of a living room, and that just adds another dynamic, another layer to this. So this is what James, the half-brother of Jesus, says in James 2, starting with verse 2. He says this, "Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, 'Here's a good seat for you,' but say to the poor man, 'You stand there,' or 'Sit on the floor by my feet,' have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts?" Okay, so basically what he's just saying here simply is, if someone comes into your church, into the living room, whatever, and you basically discriminate between them for whatever reason, have you not kind of ruined the movement Jesus has started here? Isn't that off base from this thing that we're doing that should be in the footsteps of Jesus? And the man-made heading for this section is favoritism forbidden. And I think the key words to hone in from James here in this little section is, you show special attention. You show special attention. Now that was a huge no-no in a Jesus community, in a church, because Jesus and his followers who got it had gone to such great lengths to really elevate the perceived value. Okay, understand, all people are equally valuable to God, but to elevate the perceived value of people, whether those people be the poor, whether they be non-Jewish people in the eyes of the Jews, whether it be women, whether it be children, Jesus and his followers were raising the perceived value of people. And so James says, man, I have to reemphasize, make sure that you don't get this twisted around and start favoring the people that the world would favor. Make sure that you value people equally and don't just show special attention to people that you're naturally attracted to because of wealth, for instance, or looking good. I mean, we could probably change this to a multitude of things to make this contemporary, to change it to now. But you could say you show special attention to those who are nicely dressed. You show special attention to people who came in with nice cars. You show special attention to younger people. Aren't they so much more valuable than older people? We show special attention to maybe people who are on stage. I'm only concerned with talking to people that were on stage in an auditorium setting. Now, maybe you show special attention to people who are the same color as you or race as you. Maybe it's people who just in general look like you. They're your demographic in general. Or, let's just be honest, you show special attention to people who are attractive to you. Just attractive to you. Man, that's a good-looking guy. It doesn't even have to be sexually attracted. Just that person is attractive to me. And so there's special attention that James is saying, hey, in your Mo groups, in your meetings together, when you gather to worship, make sure you don't do that, because Jesus made really clear efforts to destroy that and to make God's people different than the rest of the world. That we wouldn't judge people the same way others do. So, and I think, by the way, the main point of this passage is that James is saying that the church, God's people, should aim to something that's very difficult, maybe impossible. Something that we should do. The church should show special attention to everyone. Everyone's a big deal. And man, I got to be honest, that's daunting when I think about that being the theme here. That's daunting. Everyone gets special attention. I believe in monsters, and I even more specifically believe in the invisible man. The invisible man is someone that you don't even see. And maybe it's because you're showing special attention to someone else that you already know you connect with, you have things in common, they're attractive to you for whatever reason, and therefore there are other people slipping by you that you're not even aware that they're around you they're invisible. And so to show special attention to everyone, man, that's a tall order. That is so difficult to do. That's tedious effort and exercise, especially because some people are naturally invisible to me. Some people are naturally, and they might be different people, but some people are naturally invisible to you. And guess what? I need to work on that. And guess what? You need to work on that. That's the part where the sermon sucks, okay? Because I get it. I know I need to work on it, but you do too. You know, how many of you have seen, this is really going to kind of categorize the spiritual levels of people in the room. How many of you have seen the movie Shallow Hal by round of applause? I have. You're allowed. Okay, so obviously the people who didn't clap are the very spiritually mature in the room because they wouldn't see this movie. But Shallow Hal is a 2001 Farrelly brother. For some people in the room, we need to say this is an old movie. But for people like me, you're just like, it's just a movie. It's not that long ago. Okay, it wasn't in the 20th century or anything. So the Farrelly brothers comedy, it's about a single guy whose name is Hal. And Hal's played by Jack Black, an amazing actor. And he's, that was tongue-in-cheek. And he's a nice dude, but he's way too concerned about physical appearances. And so he's only shooting for women that he thinks are drop-dead gorgeous, and he has no interest in what you might call inner beauty. You know, things like character, work ethic, moral, any of that stuff. He's just not concerned. He just wants to know, do I think she's hot, okay? And so one day he runs into the famous American life coach, motivational speaker, Tony Robbins, in an elevator. Tony Robbins hypnotizes Hal so that Hal can only see a person's inner beauty. So if they are a person of character, he sees them as attractive on the outside. And if they're just a physically gorgeous person to him, but on the inside they're terrible, then he sees them as ugly, okay? And that's basically what he's hypnotized as. So later, when he meets a girl named Rosemary, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, he sees Rosemary as a slender, beautiful, kind of trophy blonde, if you will. But that's not what Rosemary looks like to his buddy and sidekick, Mauricio, who's played by Jason Alexander from Seinfeld. That's not what Jason Alexander sees because he hasn't been hypnotized. And so when Hal's like, oh, Rosemary, I mean, what a dream, right? He's like, are we looking at the same person here right now? Because Hal sees her inner beauty. So he thinks she's gorgeous in his own eyes. And his buddy's like, what? Now, just before we go any further, let me just make this clear. Attractive is different to different people, right? Can we just acknowledge that and move on? Different people find different things attractive, okay? So let's just set aside like, oh, he's talking about them. It's clearly not me. No, different people find different things attractive and characteristics attractive. But in this case, I'm talking about what's attractive or unattractive to specific people. Have I qualified the crap out of that? Can I move on? Okay, so Shallow Hal. In this behind-the-scenes kind of extra footage interview stuff that happened with the movie, they talk about something really interesting. It's about how they basically had made this prosthetic suit for Gwyneth Paltrow, and they were ready to do the makeup on her and all that, and they were going to transform her into her character, Rosemary. And so they wanted to do it, make sure they got it right before they filmed. So they go into a hotel room in New York City, and they put on all the prosthetics, the bodysuit, they put on the makeup. They put the time and the money into making sure, because they want to know if they send her out in public, will people buy it? Or does she look like she's walking around on Halloween in a fake suit, you know? And so they put on all the makeup, all the prosthetic stuff, and when they see her afterward, the people who do the costuming and makeup, they're like, oh, bravo, that looks amazing. Like, it's a total transformation. You can't tell it's her, but it looks real. And they're like, man, this is good, bravo. Let's let her go out now in public, and let's see how people react. And so Gwyneth Paltrow goes down to the bar in the hotel in New York City, and she wanders around the lobby. She goes into the hotel, and it had a profound impact on her. Like, hearing about it was fascinating. She said this. She said, no one knew it was me. She said, and I'm a person who's kind of used, she said it very humbly, but honestly, I'm a person who's kind of used to being stared at everywhere I go, but nobody would acknowledge me at all. She said, nobody would even make eye contact with me. She said, it was quite painful. She was like, new experience for me. Now, ladies in the room, they've learned socially in our culture today, mostly in public, they don't make eye contact with men, okay? Because a lot of men are creepers, and they're just like, don't even look at men. Just when you're in a public place, just move along, just move along. So a lot of women have kind of learned that lesson. She's like, that was kind of what I've learned in life. People are always staring at me, and there's people I need to be nice to, but there's a lot of places I just head straight forward, just move on. She's like, but now I get in the suit and I was the invisible man. No one saw me. I looked at people, and they didn't pay any attention. I was in a bar. That's another level. I was in a bar making eye contact with men. That's what men are looking for usually in a bar, is eye contact with women. They looked right through me. It was like I wasn't even there, and you could see she was shaken by it. This is an experience that I've never ever had before. So James, the brother of Jesus, would say, you show special attention, metaphorically apply this in many different places, but you show special attention to Gwyneth Paltrow. Oh, okay, ooh, come sit next to me. Can I buy you a drink? But not to Rosemary. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. She is, metaphorically, the invisible man. You don't even see Rosemary. I have a friend whose name is Terry. She's a longtime Christian, but after her father died of cancer and her mom became chronically ill, she got depressed and she was searching. Follower of Jesus, but was going through a tough time. And she lived in Cincinnati at the time, but the weekends she wasn't there much because she was traveling back home to Indiana to care for and to hang out with her mom. And so she didn't go to church for about 2 years. And there got to be a point where she was starting to search again and was just feeling like, man, I need to get connected to a church. And finally she decided that she would go to church in Cincinnati. And so the church she went to in Cincinnati had multiple services, and she guesstimates that the service she went to was probably about 400 people, a lot of people there. And she said to me, she told me the story that I decided, and by the way, she didn't know I was speaking about the invisible man or anything like that. But I remember the story from years ago that she told me. She said, I decided to smile the best I could, and I tried to make eye contact. I also spent time browsing through information at the visitor center before and after the service. And people were busy and friendly in their own small groups, but as I tried to make eye contact and smile, it was as if they were looking straight through me, she said. It was like I wasn't even there. And she's basically saying, I was the invisible man. Now, before going to the auditorium, she said, I kind of went to the bathroom because I'm like at the visitor center. I'm like smiling, that kind of thing. Like it's clear. I'm looking for information. I'm new here. And just no one spoke to me. They stayed in their groups. She said, so I went in the bathroom to kind of gather myself. And there was another lady in the bathroom. And while I was there, I was washing my hands. And while I was washing my hands, suddenly I just got this like tickle and I sneezed. And the woman next to me said, bless you. And then she left the restroom. And that became kind of something in her head that she became kind of the bless you lady, if you will, because it was the only person that talked to her all morning. She said after the service, and I sat in the crowd, I went back out and I went to the visitor center and I hung out there a little bit longer. I made more eye contact with people. I smiled at people. She said, but no one else talked to me. And that was really kind of the Gwyneth Paltrow experience in the hotel bar, just a similar type of experience. Now, no one ever said, good morning, how are you doing? Hey, have we ever met before? I'm so-and-so. What's your name? Can I help you find anything? Hey, or in our context, are you part of a Mo group? Hey, don't the Bengals suck? I mean, wouldn't you rather live in Cleveland than Cincinnati, which is really just a suburb of Kentucky? Isn't Cedar Point a lot better than Kings Island? No one said any of these things, which are obvious things to talk about at a church in Cincinnati. And basically, Terry said this. She said, I was a single person in the midst of families who had places to go and people to see. And this is what killed me. She said, it reminded me of how much of a nobody I am. She said, I had a half-hour drive home feeling sad, lonely, empty, and confused. How can I share space with so many people and not a single one speak with me? And you know what breaks my heart is that isn't just some isolated event in Cincinnati. That's happened dozens of times that I don't know, with me being the one who had a main beeline opportunity with someone, but they were invisible to me and I didn't see them. I'm the one who didn't say hi. I'm the one who didn't engage them. I'm the one that didn't ask their name. I'm the one that didn't say, hey, I don't know that we know each other. Is this your first time, or have you been coming for 6 years and I'm just an idiot, That kind of thing. That's happened so many times at Momentum where I've been the person with the clearest path in the lobby, and I've totally not even seen the person. That's freaking horror story stuff to me as a follower of Jesus. That I missed seeing someone that then says, it just going to church, being around people of God, it just reminded me of how much of a nobody I am. I was in a crowd. I mean, some of you know this. I know this from many contexts I've been in. And I'm not too shy. I'm not too scared to talk to people, to make jokes, to make fart noises with my armpits. I'm none of those things. But the only thing worse than being lonely is being lonely in a crowd. Man, I'm lonely, but now I'm stepping out, taking a risk, and I'm not engaging with anyone. I just feel lonely in a crowd now. And I hate that happens around me and among God's people in many different churches, but that happens. And for some reason, I don't even see them. It's like they're invisible to me. Maybe you've heard of unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is kind of the idea, it's social stereotypes about different groups of people that immediately pop into your head, and you don't even realize it, based on whatever people group and whatever unconscious bias you have about that person. Well, I've heard of unconscious bias, but I think there's also something you might call unconscious blindness. I just didn't even see that person. For whatever reason, I was completely blind to their existence around me. There are people that we don't even see, and it's the invisible man. Funny, just a little side note is, in the book, there comes a time when the stranger at the inn, after a few months, is running out of money to pay for room and board. And it's clear, it's becoming public that he's running out of money because he's not paying. And he's saying, yeah, I'll get back, I owe you. And suddenly there's a mysterious theft in the village. Suddenly, one time at night, a woman wakes up and she hears footsteps in the house. She shakes her husband. He wakes up. And the thing that gives away someone's in the house is a sneeze. Someone sneezes, and they hear it. He grabs a poker. They go downstairs. They hear the jingling of coins. He realizes the family's gold coins, their stash is being stolen. They run into the room where the stash is at. They search. Nobody's in there. And then out in the hallway, they hear it again, a loud noise, a violent sneeze. They run out there. Back door opens and closes, gone. And they never see him. But the only clue that the invisible person was there was a sneeze. And that reminds me of Terry's story. The only time someone even talked to me is just simply to say the culturally acceptable, oh, bless you, I'm out. This is the thing that I love. Here's a little passage it's called the Book of Hebrews. This is one of those X-Files kind of in the Bible. It's like one of these weird things. You're like, really, God? You do that? It says this: keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Talking to God's people, followers of Jesus. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. That's a strange passage. What does that mean, Dan? I think I know what it means, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it basically means that some angels are secret shoppers. I think that's what's going on here. It's like they cross paths, and it's not just in Momentum's lobby or auditorium or in our Mo group. It's at your school. It's at your office. It's out in the streets. That maybe there are people who pass you by that maybe God is just, I don't know, putting us to a little bit of a test to see if we see them, to see if they're completely invisible to us. And that's something from a horror story. Again, it's like, oh man, I'm sure that there are people that I've been invisible to, or people who have engaged me for kindness or hospitality that have been completely invisible to me. And I've been like, now, you'll be good sitting over here. And it's like they're totally invisible to me. And maybe they evaluate whether we see them or whether they're the invisible man. That's scary. Why would God test us like that? Okay, if that scripture's true and I'm interpreting it correctly, which is the way most followers of Jesus interpret it, by the way, if that's true, I think it's because God wants to condition us to be on the lookout for people who might be invisible to the rest of the world. Like he's just saying, hey, every once in a while for fun, I'm going to do a little X-Files thing, and I'm going to send an angel your way that's disguised. You won't know it. And just by knowing that secret shoppers might show up, you'll be like, dang, I need to be on the lookout because I don't want to miss the invisible person. I want to make sure that I'm trained to see with the eyes of Christ. Like I want to see people with the eyes of Christ. And God, by saying this is something I sometimes do, that God's people will make it a habit to show special attention to everyone and to not let invisible men slip through our midst. Now, I will say, as a caveat on the other side, if you are someone who's a guest or a newish person, or maybe you've come to Momentum for years, but say you're an extremely quiet or shy person or you're socially awkward, we have some people at Momentum who would freely admit, yeah, I'm socially awkward, you know? And sometimes I'm like, you really are, but I love you, okay? You're socially awkward, though. People just know that sometimes, but you're wanting to be loved and accepted. Let me challenge you with this. It's very simple, okay? A simple message to the timid. You don't have to make a scene, be extroverted, come across like a party maker, but you do have to make an effort. Okay? Because one time, there might be a time where a season pops up, and this happens for all of us, where suddenly you feel lonely, and then it's easy to kind of poke fingers and blame at God's church and be like, no one talks to me. No one addresses me. No one engages me. And the truth is, you haven't made any effort. And sometimes, God's people have tried to talk to you. Some people have engaged you. Maybe it's not always the exact person you want to engage you, but people have made an effort, but eventually when that effort gets shut down and there's no effort by the timid person, eventually, even for an extroverted person, it becomes intimidating to keep approaching that person. Like either they don't like me, they don't want to be talked to, or whatever, and it just eventually gets old, and I made the effort for a while, but I'm eventually giving up. You clearly don't want to be engaged, but I feel like sometimes people are like, I'm walking through here just ready for another excuse to give a black eye to God's church. You know, just to say, you know what, I tried. I went there for 3 weeks, and I didn't talk to anybody, but I waited to stand back and see if all I got was a bless you, you know? And so if you're timid, you have to make an effort. You don't have to make a scene, but you have to make some kind of effort because it is a two-way street, and we want to be God's people. We want to be the kind of people that don't miss the invisible person walking through here. You know, I've seen a lot of effort and among God's church in many places to see the invisible person, to see them, to recognize and engage and love them. That's one of the reasons I think that I became a follower of Jesus. I was invited to church camp by a friend. I wasn't a follower of Jesus. And there were a group of pretty girls who I was always watching and looking at like, man, they're pretty girls. I'd like to know them. And they engaged me, talked to me, invited me to sit with them at lunch. They thought I was funny. And I was like, hey, looks aren't everything, baby, you know. And so I would go sit with them. And I couldn't get it because I was the invisible man in my public school. I was. But somehow, in Jesus' community, pretty girls talked to me. They engaged me. They noticed me. They showed special attention to me. They didn't know that I was some punk, unchurched kid. But they engaged me. They showed me attention. And I got to tell you, that's the power of a Christian lady. You know, I know a lot of dudes who are now following Jesus because some Christian lady saw them, paid attention to them, and engaged them and talked to them. People of Jesus, you can do the same simple thing in your cafeteria at school. You can do the same thing in your break room at work. You can engage people who are sitting by themselves, you know, they're invisible. They're probably maybe even annoying or quiet, but to continually give them the opportunity to be a part of the group and be seen and be loved and be accepted, man, it's a huge thing that gives people dignity by not letting them be the invisible man. In the summer, sometimes I take like a 4-week preaching break where I still do big picture momentum work and I think through leadership stuff and I study and I prepare for the fall and the winter. But usually probably about 2 of those weeks that I don't have to preach, I might go visit another church in the area. Sometimes my family comes with me, sometimes they don't. One time when we were getting ready to launch our Twinsburg, Macedonia campus, I went to Destiny Church in Twinsburg. And I went there, and I went by myself that Sunday, and I'll tell you, it's not just you. When I show up at a church for the first time, I'm nervous, I feel awkward, and I have no idea what's about to happen. Is someone going to talk to me? Are they going to be nice? Are they going to hand me a poisonous snake? What the frick? might happen in this church. I don't know. People run around the room with flags. I don't know what's going to happen. Fun with flags. Dr. Sheldon Cooper. I have no idea what's going to happen. And so I walk in and I felt awkward. I was nervous just like you may have been this morning or the first time you came to Momentum. So I walk in and immediately someone gave me a program. They greeted me, said, hey, how you doing? Good morning, good morning. And I walked in and just kind of kept going on my way and headed toward the lobby area where they had coffee and goodies and all that. And there are small groups of people talking, just kind of like what Terry talked about. But I will never forget, it's imprinted in my mind. This older black gentleman was talking to a few people over kind of off the side, and all of a sudden, he saw me enter into that lobby. He made eye contact with me, and it was like a slow motion. It was like something from a show for me, where he disengaged from those people, and our eyes met from across the room. And it wasn't romantic, but it was extremely noticeable. He was just like, and he starts walking toward me, and I knew this dude was coming to talk to me. And he left people. He was in the middle of a conversation. I think I even saw him give one of these things. And he walked away, and he starts coming to me in slow-mo, and he's like, sticks out his hand, gives me this big old warm handshake, and he says, hey, this is your first time? Are you new here? And I was like, yeah, actually, this is my very first time. He said, I'm Smitty. What's your name? I said, I'm Dan. I'm actually a Smitty, too. I was like, that's cool. And he goes, well, let me show you. Here's some coffee. You don't know anybody here? I said, actually, I know one person here. I think he's the sound guy. He's my audio technician when I rap and make records. He's the guy that records me and mixes and all that stuff. I said, Gavin. Oh, I know Gavin. He's a great dude. He's a great dude, man. And so he was like, here's coffee. Here's some stuff over here. And the auditorium is this way. I knew exactly where I was going because Marvin, Smitty, showed me where to go. And I would tell you what, the impression, I still can imagine that exact moment when he disengaged from people that were attractive and familiar to him to come talk to this. That's next level. But he was like, okay, I don't know this guy. I'm not going to let him be invisible here. And it's burned into my memory. And I wanted to know that dude after that. I've texted my friend Gavin before. What was that dude's name? Oh, that's Smitty. He's awesome. And they're like, man, I want to know that guy. Yeah, he's an awesome dude. I want to know that dude because of it. Okay? Every Sunday morning, there's an army of us here. But sometimes, maybe not all the time, there's a few people who are Smitties. And I'm just going to be honest, we need more Smitties in God's church. Like less people who are concerned with, man, I might be embarrassed. I might introduce myself to someone. And maybe they were on the launch team that started Momentum. Maybe they've been around a long time or whatever. But just be like, hey, I don't know you. What's your name? And to engage people to say, man, I'm going to make it a point to connect with them. I see them week after week, but I don't have a name with the face. If that's true of anyone, which I'm going to say it's true for all of us, then to do the Smitty, basically, and to say, I'm going to disengage and I'm going to go to that person just in case they're the invisible man. Just in case they've been walking through, no one's been engaging them, and they feel like their value's dropping. Like, I realized how much of a nobody I was because I was lonely in a crowd. On Sunday morning, you have that opportunity to make sure that no one is the invisible man. And if you're going out for lunch after church, to say to this person that maybe is new or you just met, hey, would you like to go to Chipotle with us? To invite them into that group. Maybe they're on a budget like me and my wife and we'll say, nope, can't afford to go out to Chipotle today. But you've invited them. You've said, come on, come join us if you want to. We're going out to lunch. Every Sunday afternoon, except for this Sunday afternoon, we have student ministry in the afternoon. Unleashed here in Garfield Heights. And students have an opportunity to not allow someone to be the invisible student. To say, man, I know what middle school's like. I know what high school's like. I'm one of them. And I know what it's like to walk in a room, you don't know anyone, and it doesn't feel like anyone cares you're there. To say, man, I'm going to make sure no one is the invisible student. I'm not going to stay in my clique of friends that are attractive to me, familiar to me. I'm going to disengage, and I'm going to show special attention to this kid who's shown up. Maybe a new friend. I think the point of the passage from James 2 is this, is to show special attention to everyone. But I'll be honest, the only way that's even feasibly possible is if it's a group effort. It has to be a team effort because we're all trying to rid ourselves of those blind spots and somehow people who are invisible to us, and it has to be a team effort. Many people are going to walk through here feeling devalued if it all comes down to Dan Smith. Bottom line. There's so many people that I will miss any given Sunday morning. And the way to show special attention to everyone is through a team effort. The entire church must have a vision for the invisible. The entire church. It has to be, I'm outwardly focused on a Sunday morning. I'm engaging other people to give them value and dignity and to see them with the eyes of Jesus. That's the only way for the church to be the church. And I think that's what James wants in this passage. Show special attention to everyone. And depending on the church, the neighborhood, the demographic of the church, there's so many different groups of people who could be invisible. I mean, so many. There's single people. It could be people with illnesses or people who struggle financially or introverts or emotionally wounded people or teenagers, college-age people, couples who don't have children, people who have lost a spouse, homeless people, people who are mentally ill, people from a different cultural background, and maybe there's a language barrier. There's so many people who could be invisible, and I love some of those groups on that list. You love some of the different groups on that list, but there's also some of those groups that I'm just naturally, man, I don't know why, but I don't see them immediately. Like they're invisible to me, and so as a team, the entire church has to have a vision for the invisible. By the way, at the end of the novel, the only way they capture the invisible man, it takes a mob. A mob captures the invisible man. Now, eventually my sneezing friend Terry moved to Cleveland because she knew what was up. She was down in Cincinnati. You better move to Cleveland. So she moved to Cleveland, came to Momentum, and luckily Momentum's team was on point that day. And it wasn't me who engaged her. It was one of our drummers in a rotation, a dude named Lou Piper, who was greeting and handing out programs. Lou Piper is a squirrely little dude. He weighs 14 pounds. He's about 4'2", and he was passing out programs that day. And when Terry came in, first time, she's nervous because in her background, in her mind, she's like, man, one time I went to a church and all I got was a bless you. And she walks in and Lou gives her a program and gives her this big old warm hug when she shows up. Now, some people might never come back because of that. But for Terry, it was perfect. She was like, he gave me this big warm hug, and that was just a microcosm of what I experienced as other people engaged me and I wasn't invisible. People saw that I was there. They cared. So much so, eventually Terry became an apprentice leader in a Mo group. Now she's moved away. She lives in Indiana. But occasionally, she writes me and sends me a message to say the impact that Momentum had on her because we saw her. She says it over and over. You saw me. You acknowledged me. People warmly greet. And I didn't even know that I liked a church like Momentum. But people at Momentum cared. They saw me. I didn't know that the music was for me. I liked old fuddy-duddy music. But people saw me and cared for me. She ended up being an apprentice leader. And that's the deal. Momentum moves people, even invisible people, forward to love God, love people, and make disciples who make disciples. Let's pray. God, I pray for an incredible team effort from this team, God. Just the vision that Jesus put before us, that other followers, including his own half-brother James, put before us, that we would show special attention to anyone and everyone, whether it be someone has, they're struggling economically, whether it's because there's something culturally that's different to us, that's unfamiliar, just so many reasons that we might have affinity towards someone, but totally not see another person. So God, I pray that in your church, that there will be this two-way street of people that don't want to be anonymous, and when they engage, that they're loved, that they're accepted, they're seen, and they don't move on invisible feeling devalued. God, so much of a spiritual story begins or is ignited by the feeling of being valued. And so God, may your church Momentum, may your other churches in Greater Cleveland and beyond be good at that. Help us to be great at that, God. God, in the name of Jesus, we want to give people dignity and show them value in the name of Christ. Help us as we try. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.